Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to this special edition where we're taking a look at the rising numbers of women in the military. We're at this army base near Lyon where a French regiment here has more than 40% of females among its ranks. So we're asking, is victory within sight in the battle for equality? Camp de la Valbonne is home to the French Army Medical Corps. It prides itself on the high number of women serving in the regiment.
I
think it's a big plus for women here because they see that they have the same mental and physical abilities as men, and that gives them confidence.
Whether the action is led by a man or a woman, there's no difference. What I see is the same willingness to carry out the missions with excellence.
I've been in the army for 18 years, so mentalities have changed. Like everyone, we have to show we are up to the task. We have to prove we can do it. And I haven't felt any opposition.
With few exceptions, women have been excluded from the field of combat, but that is starting to change with a growing number of women in armies across the world. Not surprisingly, though, that number does change from one country to the next.
Gender parity is still a long way off in most countries' militaries. Among the most equal, the armies of Israel, the US and France are all made up of more than 10% women. In France and in the US, women can serve in all branches of the armed forces. In the United States, women make up 21% of the Air Force, 19% of the Army, and 19% of the Navy. Meanwhile, in Asia, Chinese women represent 7% of the country's 2.3 million strong army. Indian women can serve in the military, but currently only for 14 years. That could soon change. India's Supreme Court has ruled that the army must respect equality between men and women. 20 countries, including France, have a female defense minister. 6 of them are in Africa, including the Central African Republic, Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Sudan, Togo, and South Africa.
Discrimination and sexual harassment against women in the military is a problem the world over. In 2018, the Saint-Cyr Military Academy, the French equivalent of Sandhurst in Britain or West Point in the US, faced a raft of allegations of sexism. France 24's reporters went to find out what's being done to stamp it out.
8 a.m. roll call. The day starts with a march on campus and the song of the Lyonnais Infantry. The group is predominantly male, but among them is Morgane, a first-year student studying science. She is one of 3 girls in a class of 34. Her dream is to become a military pilot.
My mum was worried that I was going to join the army. But she knows me, and that I don't usually let things get to me. I used to play sports on male teams, so being in this masculine environment doesn't bother me.
4 hours of intense exercise per week, including 3,000 meters of running, and also strength training. 5 pull-ups for women and 12 for men. A difference that this male student says he understands.
Men and women aren't the same. It's innate. I don't think we can deny this. I wouldn't mind being under the command of a woman. And in fact, one of our superior officers is a woman. And I have no problem with that.
To become a commanding officer, the way forward is to advance to Saint-Cyr-Coët-Quidon. Chloé Amélie says her gender won't keep her from making it and hasn't been an issue so far.
That old way of thinking is not really a problem here at this high school. I know that there have been some controversies,
But things have changed since then. This is my second year, and I've never been told by a boy that I don't belong here.
10 years ago, this former student at another military school had a much different experience. She ended up leaving the academy.
Almost all the girls in my class had problems with harassment, catcalling, degrading nicknames. We didn't say anything. I was called fat, and really, all the girls were called fat. There was physical harassment as well, sometimes of a sexual nature. People would make pig noises when girls would walk by.
In 2018, female students at Saint-Cyr came forward to report cases of harassment. 2 years later, rape charges were filed. In the face of the crisis, the Army implemented measures meant to address gender inequality.
I believe that today we are past that. The presence of women in the Army is no longer something that's a big issue, thanks to what we teach the students and because of prevention measures in the Army.
Despite that, Saint-Cyr remains overwhelmingly male. The number of female students is slowly on the rise, up about 6% in 8 years.
The military alliance NATO has recognised the need for increased female participation and leadership in defence and security. At its Brussels headquarters, I met Claire Hutchinson, its special representative on women, peace and security. What steps are being taken in order for NATO to increase the number of women in its forces?
Well, across our 30 nations who are all very much seized of this agenda and have worked over the years. I mean, this isn't new to us. We've been doing this since the 1950s in different capacities. Recognising that women's role is very important, but recognising that women's role from different ranks all the way up to leadership is very important. All of our nations have taken, obviously, our policy. They work with their national action plans, and they create their own national priorities in terms of defence, making sure that more women are included. But it's not just about, obviously, getting women into, it's also about retaining the women that they have.
Has the process been difficult, though?
I think it depends. I mean, generally gender equality is something that's difficult worldwide, and no one has done it right yet, because we wouldn't be having a conversation about it if anybody had done it right. But I think there's different recognition in different places. Of course, all NATO allies make this a priority because it's a priority from the Secretary General. SACEUR, our leadership have all committed to this, and so it is a priority. But I think it's different levels of different cultures coming on board. So a different country may be at a different starting block to another. Some have been working very hard, very long on this. Some are just new to this. So I think the resistance or the pushback is not necessarily in a resistance to gender equality, but it's just getting to a place where everyone's on the same page.
At what level does the military have to reach in terms of numbers of women in order for the culture to actually change?
Well, we know that it's called the tipping point. It's a 30%, and this is actually a physics equation, where we say under 30% you can't make change because, especially in a patriarchal structure, women will tend to not go against the grain. They will not go against what is the norm. When you get 30%, it starts to change a little bit, where you start saying a critical mass of voice, changing culture, changing the way things are done.
Strength in numbers.
This is what they say in that, but of course they all have to be thinking about changing culture, because you can put women simply into something, or women have access to something, even with the 30%, if they're not committed to changing the culture for everybody. And I think that is really important. And it's not just having women, it's having men on board. So we have to make sure this is a whole of society approach, a whole of population, a whole of military. if you have resistance in say, men, or men not willing to embrace this idea of equality, then you are going to have a struggle, even with 30%. So I think we need to get the critical mass number, but we also need to do a lot in changing structural obstacles.
With increased numbers of women, does that change the way in which the military operates on the battlefield?
Well, we have to remember that the military has a specific purpose. I mean, the purpose of the military is to defend, to deter. I mean, NATO's job is very specific in what we do. And so it shouldn't really necessarily change what we do, but it should change the way we maybe think about how does defense take place? What is the shape of defense? We know women and men think differently about security. We know what they identify security is different. And we know today's threats are very different. And so having more women, it's not about brute strength anymore. It's really about a different kind of military. We have, where we need more people in technology. We need more people working in intelligence. We know more people working with working with communities. So there's a different shape that we see of the military today. And that's where we have different skills that are required, and women fit in very well with them. And I think that is what's changing in how we look to the future of what Defence Forces is or can be.
We've just seen a report about Saint-Cyr, an elite French military academy which has had to deal with serious cases of sexual harassment. What steps can militaries take in order to prevent that from happening?
Well, first of all, a zero tolerance policy, that it's just not acceptable. We were very proud of the policy that we adopted on preventing and combating sexual exploitation and abuse in 2019. And NATO stands very firmly with that we have a zero tolerance approach. Our militaries have that. You have to start from the top, and you have to be very clear about what is acceptable and what isn't. And any kind of sexual harassment, any kind of bullying, mobbing, anything isn't acceptable and has to be dealt with. And when you make a very clear pronouncement of what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable for men and women, then that should go down through the ranks. And those who do not follow those rules are not, I don't believe, should be members of a particular organisation, because you're upholding your values. For us in NATO, our values are very important.
Claire, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And that's it for this special edition. So until our next show, bye for now.